G'day everyone. So in this third video, we're going to be going through another sketch setup here. We'll be doing this one, which is called the C-wrench. And it's going to be a little bit different to the previous sketches that we've done. We're focusing a lot on different types of lines. So we've got some curves in this one. Apart from just straight lines, we'll have some different constraints like tangent constraints. And we're going to look at a few new tools that we haven't really looked at yet. So to start off with, I'll go back to home and I'll start up a new part like we always do. So new part file, and we're going to go and start our 2D sketch. So remembering the 2D sketch button up the top left here in the ribbon there, and we're going to select the XY plane again. So remembering the X is the horizontal, the Y is the vertical. Now, having a look at our C-wrench sketch before we start here, we have a lot of different measurements, of course. We have radiuses on the various curves, like these ones here and the one down the end here. We've got a couple of small radiuses in between our curves as well. We have it all around this kind of center line through the middle here. And that center line goes through this point here. Now this point here we're going to use as our point of origin. The reason for that is we have a lot of measurements that come off that point. So the center point of our larger arc here is 5mm away from the center point of our smaller arc. We also have this line here, which happens to be 14mm away from our center point here, and our point of origin there. And the center point of this arc at the very end, which has a radius of 12, is 135mm from that point of origin. So given that we have all that information, we can actually go ahead and start now. And I'm going to start with all my arcs. So I'm going to put in these two here and the arc at the very end of what will be the handle of this tool. So going back to the part file I've just started, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the center point arc tool to start with. So this one here, as you can see there, gives us a bit of info if we click on it. And we're going to start with, as I said, that first arc. So clicking on the center point here, clicking out, it doesn't really matter how far we go out. We'll click just below our x-axis here, and we'll go right around and back below it on the other side as well. So that's our first arc. Now, knowing that, and I've just zoomed out a little bit there, knowing that the next arc is a little distance away from that on the x-axis for its center point, we'll start that one as well. And same sort of thing, beneath the x-axis, up and around, and this one probably doesn't have to go quite as far, maybe to about there. Alright, and that should be plenty of distance on it. So that's our first two arcs. Now before we go any further, it's going to be a good idea to put some dimensions and a couple of constraints on these two as well. So I'm going to start off with the center arc here. I'm going to start off with a lock constraint on the center point. So we're just going to lock that there now. Okay, so this one, as it is already referencing to that center point, happens to be restricted in that spot anyway, so we won't worry about that. So just turn off our lock constraint there, and we'll go for our horizontal constraint, and that's just to constrain the center point of that outer arc to our center point of our drawing. So we'll click OK now, and we'll just add a couple of dimensions to these as well. So just having a quick look at the drawing, we've got a 22mm radius on the center one and a 35mm radius on the outer. So clicking our dimension tool there, type in 22 for this one, and for the outer one, 35. Right, and very last dimension on this one is the distance that the center point is from our point of origin. So we'll click on those two there, 5mm. Right, so now you can see that they have gone purple, so they are defined, both of these lines as far as the dimensions, but we're not entirely constrained yet. As you can see down here, it says 4 dimensions needed. We'll zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to grab the little pan hand tool here, which brings it across to the left there, and we'll go and add in our arc at the end of the handle out here. So back to our center point arc tool. So you can see right now I'm on the dimension tool because it's lit up blue. Now I can either click on another tool or I can right click and press OK, then I can go to that next tool. So adding in the very end arc here, and it doesn't really matter again terribly how perfect this arc is as long as it's there, which it is now. So we've added that arc in, let's give it a dimension, and this one happens to be 12mm in its radius, so there we go. And we're going to dimension it out from our center point as clicking on the center point, sorry, the point of that arc, 135 millimeters. So now we can start to see that we're starting to get closer to what this drawing will look like. Now, for the next stage, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in the two lines which connect this arc to these two arcs. So back again to my line tool, clicking on the end of this one here, and the end of my arc there, and same from the bottom here. You can see my dimensions slightly in the way, so you can see better. There we go. So line tool, end of that arc there, get the little green dot, and back to that arc there. And I'll click OK. So now I've got my two lines here, so the rest of the handle connected through my arcs. Now at this point here, I want to add a few constraints in before we go too much further. So we're going to go to the tangent constraint tool here, and just clicking on that one once, we'll go from that line to the end of this arc here, and same on the bottom here. So now we have those all constrained together with a tangent constraint on each. Now if we have a quick look at the drawing, we can see that we do have two radiuses between these lines and these two arcs, and those are both a radius of 10. Now there's two different ways we can go about including these. We can either use a couple of arcs, so we can put in some arcs and then join the lines to the arcs, or we can use what's called the fillet tool, which just happens to be in the create tool palette as well. So clicking on the fillet tool, we can see that it's got a radius dimension in it at the moment of 2 millimeters. We're going to increase that to 10 millimeters, which is what it said on the drawing there. And going between that arc, that line, you can see it's added in a couple of tangent constraints there for me, and same down the bottom here. And you can see that bottom one, now it's doing kind of the wrong thing right now. It's put it in the wrong way. Instead of going for that, we're just going to Control Z to undo that, and before we add it in, we're just going to change the length of these lines so that they're more appropriate length. Now if we go ahead and we click that fillet tool, we should get a nice fillet like the other one. Still not quite. Let's go ahead and reconnect it and try that one more time. There we go. So you can see that fillet there at the radius of 10. Now, going back to our drawing briefly, we can see that where these radiuses are, they have a center point which is a specific distance away from our x-axis. In this case, we have 20 millimeters on the outer one here and 3 millimeters on the inner one. To add that dimension in, we'll need to obviously go to our dimension tool, click on the center point of each of those arcs, or as where you put them in as fillets, and the point of origin there. And you can see I've got just over 20 right now. I'll just change that to 20. That's one arc that's correctly positioned. And the next one, again, center point, arc, and 3. And there we go. They're now in the correct positions. So we're starting to look quite a lot like the original drawing now, especially through this area. Another look back at our drawing. Now, there's probably a couple more we can add in here, because we can see that this dot here, the center point of this arc, has come down a little bit. Now, we need that to be on exactly on the x-axis. If I hover over it and highlight it there for a moment, you can see down on the bottom toolbar that it's changed to 0.424 millimeters below the x-axis. So in order to keep that on the x-axis, we're going to use the horizontal constraint. So we'll just press OK to get out of our dimension tool. Click on the horizontal constraint tool. Click the center point of that arc, and then our point of origin in the middle there. And you can see all of a sudden we've got dark purple or blue lines here, which means all of that geometry is fully constrained. So we're up to the last little bit, which is this little part here, so a little square corner on the end here. To add that in, we can see that it happens to be 14 millimeters away for this part of the line, and that the distance from the x-axis upwards is 6 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and add that in now. So I'm going to go for my line tool. I'm going to go out from the point where this arc meets the x-axis, come along my x-axis. Doesn't matter how far at this point, because I'm going to add the dimensions in soon. Then I'll go up a little bit and then back to the other arc there. Alright, and it automatically locks to those points. I'll click right click and I'll click OK. And now we can see that we've got that shape. We just need to give it some information, some dimensions and constraints. So we'll start off with dimensioning this length here to 6 millimeters. And we can see this line probably just moved down a tiny bit there, and it happens to be, we hover over it, change it a little bit each time, but we're just below that x-axis. So we're going to have to click that horizontal constraint tool. We're going to click the center point and then this very end point of the line, and that'll bring it up to the correct position. And we're starting to get to where we need to be. The very last dimension from our center point out to this line here. So clicking the dimension tool there, clicking this line here and our center point. Oop, try that one more time. So clicking the line and our center point, and you can see it's just over 14, so we'll just change that to 14. And those are the rest of the dimensions. Now, right now it still does say 2 dimensions needed, and there's probably a very good reason for that. Before we attack that, we're just going to start a new tool here, which is in the Modify palette. Now, the idea with these tools is that we can modify a sketch that we've already drawn. We're going to click the Trim tool for this operation, and holding down on the Trim tool, so you can see it goes from a plus cursor to just the cursor. I'm going to swipe over the top of the excess lines here and the one in between. And we're almost back to where we need to be, and you can see now that I've removed those extra lines. If I click OK, we are fully constrained down on the toolbar here. So that's the C-wrench. Just to have a quick look at the constraints that happen to be on this one, we'll highlight everything. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tangent constraints. So a lot of tangent constraints on this one. We've got a horizontal constraint between our point of origin and the center of this arc. We have our original construction geometry constraint on the center point of this arc here. We have another horizontal constraint for the middle of this outer arc, one for this center point, sorry, this low point here, this corner between that and our point of origin, and one finally for this line here. So that's our C-wrench. Hope that went well for you. Remember to, when you're done, click your Finish Sketch button. That'll bring you into the sketch. Click that little cube on our Navi cube here on the corner. That'll bring us back out so we can see everything. And you'll need to save your work. Thanks very much for watching.